America becomes a world power from 1870 to 1920 by Part 1. The Industrialization. A. What made it possible, and why did it take place during this time period? What made it possible? There were many causes to the rapid industrialization in America. These are unskilled and semi-skilled workers in abundance, abundant capital, no group of businessmen, the U.S. market is growing as the U.S. population is increased, and government is willing to help stimulate the economy, and abundant natural resources like coal and oil. Many different factors led to the second industrial revolution in America. After the Civil War, there was a rise in population in America. Immigrants came from all over Europe to find work. The rise in population led to a bigger demand in products. To keep up to this bigger demand, local small businesses could not keep up, so the concept of corporations and big businesses was born. Corporations are a group of businessmen who can keep track of and control the massive amounts of money. Also, the exploitation of the factory workers by the owner led to even bigger profits and lower prices to the public, which raised the standards of living, but at the expense of the workers. Lastly, the many technological innovations contributed to the Industrial Revolution. Steel was made faster and was now cheaper. Steel was used for many things like railroad tracks and spikes, multi-story factories and machines that can do the work of 100 men in 1 hour. Also, the development of a process to refine oil affected industrial practices as well. Oil was used for light to work at night and for lubricant so machines can run more smoothly. Why did it take place during this time period? The industrialization took place in the later half of the 1800s because it was the perfect time. The rise in population, the many inventions, and the rise of the capitalistic spirit. The industrialization in America was a key event in American history, as it started the chain of events that ultimately made it the country it is today. Urbanization. What caused this phenomenon? Industrialization and urbanization went hand in hand. As more jobs were made available, many people from the countryside flocked to the city in search of jobs. This rapid migration of people to the city led to terrible living conditions, as building codes were not made. The poor lived in small tenements because they were easy to afford and were usually close to the factories they worked at. Also, the workplace was worse than where they lived. Working conditions in factories were bad. Workers had to remain stationed in the same place the whole workday, doing the same thing over and over again. At the end of the workday, they would earn their small paycheck, which kept them in the same position, barely making enough for their families. Cities were becoming more modern. Streetcars were made available to almost anyone. Skyscrapers were made possible by the advances in the building material and other innovations, such as steel. As the idea of mass transit was made possible, cities were made even bigger, as people can now be taken farther by streetcars. In what ways was urbanization during this time period different from previous urbanization periods? It took place during this time period because of the start of the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, there were cities, but only about 5% of the population lived in urban areas. It took almost the entire population to produce enough food to feed everyone. Also, since there were more jobs in cities, farmers had to become city dwellers to make more money. Immigrants migrated to the U.S. to find jobs, which packed the cities even more.
Migration and immigration. What took place during this time period? During the 1880s, 90s, and 1900s, the U.S. saw a wave of immigrants arrive to their shores. People of all types of different ethnic groups came to the U.S. in search of refuge. Some came in search of jobs, religion, freedom, and security, or simply for adventure. It was all welcomed by the U.S. as immigrants can provide cheap labor and stimulate the market. How do you explain the mass movements of millions of people? The U.S. was a place of opportunities. As the economy was flourishing, there was an abundance of jobs that many native-born Americans were willing to apply for. So immigrants had many job opportunities. Immigrants had many reasons to leave their homeland. Many had the idea of working a fortune in America and then moving back with the money they had made. All this was the origin of saying American Dream. What did this new surge in population do for the U.S.? The new surge of immigrants floated the industrialization of America even more. Because of all those new jobs, unemployment went down. They caused more jobs to be created, which later would be filled in by immigrants. But nothing came easy for immigrants, as they were given the job no one else wanted, did not know the language, and got low pay. An old Italian saying summed up everyone's disappointment. I came to America because I heard the streets were paved with gold. When I got here, found out three things. First, the streets weren't paved with gold. Second, they weren't paved at all. And third, I was expected to be paved them. What reaction did America establish have on this phenomenon? Even though immigrants contributed greatly to the U.S. economy, many native-born Americans saw immigrants as a threat. They were convinced that immigrants were taking their jobs due to the fact that immigrants were willing to work for low pay. Some went as far as saying that immigrants were the cause of poverty, crime, and violence. The Chinese got the worst part of it due to their ways of living. As time went on, organization was made to further registration. Immigrants' rights. In spite of all the discrimination, few gave up and went back home.
Part 4. Political stalemate. Why was the national government so ineffective? Corruption was the main problem at the time when population in cities dramatically increased. Powerful political bosses were on the rise and they were thirsty for power and money. They would control city officials and make them corrupt as well. Political bosses would go into the city to establish good relations with the people. Of course, they didn't care for their new friends. All they saw was another voter. They ensured the immigrants' votes by helping them get settled into their new home and finding them jobs. Election election fraud was a issue as well, as it isn't as secure as it is today. Some people hired by the politician would vote as many as 5 times in a single election. Once elected and in office, the politician would become more corrupt, as they would spend the money that was for public services for personal gain. What resulted from this political stalemate? A very ineffective government, and it was going nowhere.
What fueled growth and modernization between 1870 and 1920? Growth and modernization between 1870 and 1920 was led by industrialization. It offered many jobs to people which led to migration and immigration. Many immigrants came to the USA for a better life, more money to send back home to their families. The city started growing and population went up. More and more big businesses boomed. Therefore, it gave the opportunity for many people to work, and the wealthy could buy better products.
In what way did growth and modernization impact society? Growth and modernization impact society from the city to the culture. Before, cities were very small and had very little to offer. The businesses were mom and pop shops. With the boom of industrialization, it became into big chains. and monopoly trust factories. Most of the population lived in countryside, and they went to the city for business and pleasure. After immigrants started coming to America, cities became smaller and more crowded. Getting to places on foot was harder, so mass transit, such as trolley, trains, streetcars, skyscrapers were being made. Earning money and getting a good job was getting more difficult than before. Since there was such a huge demand for jobs, many children started to work at the factories. They helped out their families financially and got a taste of what it was to work. Many Native Americans did not welcome immigrants and treated them with disrespect.
Did this change help establish the United States as a world power? If so, why? This change did help the United States to become a world power because population increased, more jobs were made, and businesses became into monopolies and trusts. When population increased, crimes were committed and help was needed. Powerful politicians rose and political machines were made. These political machines helped the people and also terrorized them if they went behind their backs. Many of the people fought for their country and immigrants were forced to fight. With this boom, the United States became stronger economically, politically, and in population.